She grew up in a small town where life moved slowly. The streets were quiet, and the houses were close together. Everyone knew each other, and everyone had an opinion. From a young age, she was different in a quiet way. While other children ran around without care, she would sit in the corner of the playground with a small notebook or an old guitar. People often wondered why she didn't join the games, why she spent so much time alone. She didn't mind the whispers or the curious looks. She had a world inside her that no one could see. At school, she was just like any other student in appearance. She was not the fastest runner, the loudest speaker, or the most confident. But she had a spark in her eyes that often went unnoticed. Her teachers thought she was quiet, maybe shy, but there was a seriousness to her that was unusual for someone her age. She listened carefully, observed everything, and often surprised people when she spoke. Her words carried more weight than anyone expected, though she spoke them rarely. Her home life was ordinary, but filled with love. Her parents worked hard, but they encouraged her in small ways. They noticed when she spent hours drawing or when she hummed melodies while doing chores. Her parents never pushed her toward sports or grades alone. They wanted her to find what made her heart happy. Even with their encouragement, it was clear to her that the outside world didn't always notice her talents. At school, at the playground, among neighbors, people didn't see the promise she carried quietly. From an early age, she loved to perform. She would sing softly to herself, pretending the walls of her room were a stage. She practiced until her fingers hurt on the piano, until her voice cracked and recovered. But she never showed this side to most people. She knew that when she did, some would laugh or dismiss her. That fear followed her like a shadow, but it never stopped her completely. She dreamed of the day she could show her talent to the world without fear in her early teens. She faced the first real challenges. Some classmates began to notice her differences and decided it was fun to make her the subject of jokes. They would laugh at her when she stumbled over words, at her quiet nature, at the songs she hummed to herself. She tried to ignore them, but it was hard. The laughter hurt more than she wanted to admit. She often went home with a heavy heart, closing the door to her room and letting her music comfort her. In those moments, she realized that no one could take away what she loved, no matter what they said. She began to withdraw even more in public, but she did not stop creating. She wrote songs. She composed small melodies. She painted and drew things that expressed her feelings better than words could. Each creation was a small victory, a way to fight back against the doubts and the laughter. She started to believe even more in herself, though silently. The world outside may have laughed, but in her heart, she was growing stronger. At school events, she would quietly participate when asked. She sang in the choir, played in small recitals, and submitted artwork to competitions. Most of the time, the results were ignored. Others received the applause and recognition. She would smile politely, not letting disappointment show, and return to her room to continue working. Each small rejection built a resilience inside her that no one could see. Her family remained her biggest supporters. They would clap the loudest during her practice recitals, hang her artwork on the walls, and remind her that talent was not measured by the applause of others. They taught her that patience, hard work, and belief in oneself were more important than instant recognition. Those lessons sank deep into her heart. She learned that even if the world didn't notice, her own efforts mattered. She also began to notice the little things that inspired her. A bird landing on a fence the way sunlight fell through her window. The sound of raindrops on the roof fall became part of her art and music. She developed a sense of sensitivity that allowed her to create work that touched emotions, even if she had no audience. She understood feelings deeply, both her own and others. This understanding became the foundation of her talent. By the time she reached high school, her talent had grown quietly. She could play complex songs on the piano, write melodies that made people feel something, and express emotions through painting in ways that few her age could. Yet, she was still invisible in the eyes of most people. Classmates who once laughed continued to underestimate her. Teachers praised the loud, outgoing students. She learned to keep her head down, to keep creating in silence, and to let her work speak in its own time. Friendships were few but meaningful. She had one or two friends who understood her world and shared small moments of creativity. They would sit together for hours, writing stories, composing music, or just talking about dreams. These friendships became lifelines. They reminded her that connection was possible even if most of the world didn't understand her. Through these bonds, she began to see the importance of patience, empathy, and persistence. Outside of school, she explored the world in small ways. She walked through the nearby fields, visited the local library for hours, and watched performances on television and online, analyzing every detail. She was fascinated by how others expressed themselves and wondered if she could someday reach that level. These quiet explorations fueled her imagination and strengthened her resolve. Her teenage years were a delicate balance of struggle and hope. Every setback, every moment of being laughed at became a lesson. She learned to protect her dreams, to nurture her talent in private, and to value the small victories that no one else noticed. She became disciplined in her practice, passionate in her creation, and careful with her heart. Despite feeling invisible at times, she knew that the world's laughter was not the measure of her worth. One day, during a small school talent show, she decided to take a tiny risk. She stood on a quiet stage, her hands trembling slightly, and performed a short piece she had been working on for months. The audience was small, and some whispered and laughed before she began. But when she started, a strange silence fell. Her fingers moved over the piano keys, her voice flowed naturally, and for a few minutes, she existed only in the music. Though the applause was polite and small, something inside her shifted. She realized that her talent could speak even when others did not understand or appreciate it. From that moment, she became more determined. She knew the journey ahead would not be easy. There would be setbacks, laughter, doubt, and loneliness. But she also understood that she had something that no one could take away: her passion, her talent, and her willingness to keep growing quietly. Every note she played, every word she wrote, every painting she completed became a step forward, even if no one saw it. She began to dream bigger, imagine stages, galleries, and audiences that might one day listen and see. Even in ordinary moments, she practiced silently. She sang while walking home, sketched while waiting for the bus, and composed melodies in her head during classes. Life continued around her, full of ordinary events, mundane conversations, and unnoticed acts. But in the midst of it, she kept building herself piece by piece, quietly confident that one day her effort would not be invisible anymore. By the end of this period in her life, she had learned important lessons that would shape her future. She understood patience, resilience, and the quiet strength it takes to believe in oneself when the world doubts. She had learned to find joy in creation without needing approval. And most importantly, she had discovered that talent and passion, nurtured carefully and consistently, could grow in silence, waiting for the moment when it would finally be recognized. And though the world around her laughed at her small setbacks, whispered about her quiet ways, and often ignored her, she carried within her a seed of something powerful, something that no laughter, no doubt, no small-minded opinion could erase. She was ready to grow that seed, to nurture it, and one day, to let it bloom in a way that would silence those who had laughed before. The first big test of her life came when she was 16. It was a local talent competition, a chance she had been quietly preparing for over months. She had composed a song that was personal, something that reflected her struggles, her quiet determination, and her dreams. It was not flashy or loud, but it carried a sincerity that was hard to ignore. She practiced every day, sometimes late into the night, imagining herself standing on that stage and letting her music speak. The morning of the competition, she felt a mix of excitement and fear. Her parents offered gentle encouragement, reminding her to do her best and not to worry about the outcome. They knew how much this meant to her, and their support made her feel safe. When she arrived at the venue, she noticed the other contestants. They were confident, loud, and some seemed to have experience far beyond their age. She felt a small pang of doubt, but she quickly pushed it aside. She had worked hard, and she knew she had something unique. As the competition began, she watched each performer. Some received applause, others were quietly ignored. The laughter started early, not directed at anyone in particular, just the casual jokes and whispers of teenagers who thought it was fun to criticize. When it was her turn, she walked onto the stage, her hands trembling slightly. The bright lights made it hard to see the audience, and she took a deep breath to steady herself. She began her performance. Her voice, soft but clear, filled the room. Her fingers moved over the piano keys with precision, every note carrying the emotion she had spent months refining. For a moment, there was silence. But then, as she reached the middle of the song, a few teenagers in the back started laughing. They whispered to each other, making jokes about how serious she looked, how quiet her voice was compared to the others. A ripple of laughter spread among a few others in the audience. Her hands froze for a second, and her heart sank. She tried to continue, forcing herself to remember the countless hours she had practiced. The laughter grew louder, and it was no longer just whispers. Some clapped sarcastically, others shook their heads. She could feel the weight of their judgment pressing down on her, heavier than anything she had faced before. The music, that had once been a source of comfort, now felt fragile, as if it could break under the pressure. For the first time, she felt the sting of real humiliation in public. She wanted to run off the stage, to hide where no one could see her, but something inside her resisted. She took a deep breath, her eyes focusing on the piano keys, on the music she loved. Slowly, shakily, she continued. Her fingers trembled, but she kept playing, her voice rising above the laughter. Even if only barely. When she finished, the room was quiet for a moment. Then some polite applause came, but it was drowned out by the whispers and chuckles of those who had mocked her. She walked off the stage with her head held high, but inside she felt crushed. The laughter, the judgment, the disbelief, it was more than she had expected. She returned to her seat, trying to hide the tears that threatened to fall. Her parents were proud, clapping gently, but they could see the pain in her eyes. That night, she sat alone in her room, reflecting on what had happened. She played the song again on the piano, letting the music wash over her. She realized that the laughter of others did not define her talent or her worth. It hurt, yes, but it was not the end. She had to find a way to turn that pain into strength. She cried, not just for the embarrassment, but for the small dream that had been bruised. Then she made a decision. She would not let anyone's laughter stop her. The days after the competition were difficult. School felt heavier. The students who had laughed continued to make jokes, some directly at her, others subtle enough to sting quietly. Even teachers, who had seen the performance, seemed to overlook her effort. She felt invisible in a way she had not experienced before. But in the solitude of her room, she began to plan. Thinking about how she could grow stronger, how she could improve until no one could ignore her talent, she started practicing more intensely. Each day, she focused not just on her music, but on building her confidence. She experimented with new styles, wrote new songs, and explored different ways to express herself. She studied performers she admired, watching how they moved, how they connected with their audience, and how they overcame challenges. Slowly, she began to see the path forward, even if it was still unclear. Her family continued to be her refuge. Her parents reminded her that setbacks were part of life and that the important thing was to keep moving forward. They encouraged her to speak about her feelings, to write them down, and to channel them into her art. Their support was a lifeline, a reminder that even if the world laughed, she was not alone. One afternoon, while walking home from school, she passed the local park and noticed a small crowd gathered around a street performer. She stopped to watch, fascinated by how the performer interacted with the audience. Some people laughed, some cheered, but the performer continued with confidence, undeterred by the mixed reactions. She felt a spark of inspiration. If someone could keep performing despite the laughter, maybe she could too. She began to perform in small, quiet ways outside of competitions. She played for friends, family, and even strangers in the park, choosing moments when she could experiment without fear of ridicule. Each performance built her courage. Each small audience gave her feedback, not in words, but in smiles and attention. She discovered that her talent had the power to touch people, even if it was only a few at a time. During this period, she also faced self-doubt more than ever. Some days, she questioned whether she was truly talented, whether her effort mattered, or whether the laughter had been right. She would sit at the piano, her hands hovering over the keys, unsure if she could continue. But then she would remember the joy of creating, the comfort of music, and the pride she felt when she finished a piece. That feeling became stronger than any doubt. Her friendships became more meaningful as well. She found people who encouraged her, who appreciated her quiet nature, and who shared her love for music and art. They became a support network, helping her process the humiliation she had faced and reminding her that her worth was not determined by those who laughed. Together, they practiced, created, and celebrated small victories. The local talent competition remained a turning point in her mind. It was a harsh lesson in the reality of public judgment, but it also planted a seed of determination. She realized that success would not come easily, that setbacks were inevitable, that the laughter of others was a test she could use to grow stronger. She began to view criticism not as a barrier, but as a challenge to overcome. Slowly, she started to imagine a future where she could stand on a stage without fear, where her music could reach more people, and where her talent would be undeniable. She visualized herself performing confidently, moving audiences with her art, and proving to herself, not to others, that her effort and passion mattered. This vision became a guide, helping her make choices that supported her growth, rather than succumbing to fear. She also learned to manage her emotions. She wrote in journals, played music to express feelings she couldn't speak, and spent time in nature to find calm. These practices helped her process the laughter, the embarrassment, and the frustration. They became tools that strengthened her inner self, making her more resilient and focused. In school, she continued to participate in small events, choosing carefully when to showcase her talent. Each attempt was a lesson, whether successful or not. She learned how to prepare mentally, how to connect with the audience, how to maintain her confidence despite nervousness. Every performance, even in private, was added to her growing skill and self-assurance. By the end of this phase, she had transformed her setback into a source of motivation. The laughter that once hurt deeply now fueled her practice, her creativity, and her determination. She understood that the world would not always be kind, that judgment and ridicule were part of life, and that resilience was essential. She had learned that setbacks were not the end of a journey, but a step toward growth. Her talent, once hidden and underestimated, was beginning to emerge in quiet but noticeable ways. She had developed discipline, patience, and an emotional depth that few others her age possessed. She realized that her journey would be long, but she was ready to continue, stronger than before, ready to face challenges, and determined to let her passion shine when the time was right. Through it all, she remained human, feeling pain, fear, and doubt, but also joy, hope, and determination. Her story was no longer just about her talent, but about the courage it takes to pursue a dream in the face of laughter and doubt. And in that quiet determination, she began to build the foundation for the moment when her abilities would finally be impossible to ignore. After the talent competition, she became quieter in public. The laughter and whispers of the audience lingered in her mind, making her cautious. She avoided unnecessary attention and spent most of her free time alone, practicing her music and creating her art. Yet this period of solitude became her most productive time. In the privacy of her room, she could explore her creativity without fear. She started experimenting with new melodies, mixing styles she had never tried, and writing lyrics that reflected her deepest thoughts and feelings. Her piano became her companion. She would sit for hours, letting her fingers move freely across the keys, sometimes playing the same piece over and over until it felt perfect. She learned patience and precision, understanding that each note mattered. Her voice, which had trembled during the competition, grew stronger as she sang along with her compositions. Slowly, her music started to carry more emotion, more power, and a unique quality that was hers alone. Art became another outlet. She painted scenes from her imagination and sketches inspired by people she saw in her daily life. Each painting reflected her emotions, the joy, the sadness, the frustration, and the hope she carried. She experimented with colors and textures, learning to express feelings that words alone could not capture. These creations were private, shared only with her family and closest friends, but they were essential for her growth. They taught her discipline, observation, and the patience to improve little by little. School continued as it always did. Classes, homework, and routine interactions with classmates went on, but she moved through them with a quiet determination. The people who had laughed at her earlier still whispered, but she no longer let it affect her as deeply. She focused on her work, her art, and her music. She realized that the judgment of others did not define her talent or her worth. Instead, she began to measure herself by her own progress and the joy she found in creation. She found inspiration in unexpected places. Long walks in the park, watching birds in the morning, listening to the rain tapping against the windows, and even the sounds of the city became sources for her music and art. She started carrying a small notebook everywhere, jotting down ideas for lyrics, melodies, or sketches. This habit allowed her to capture fleeting thoughts before they disappeared. Slowly, she built a personal collection of songs and paintings that reflected her inner world. Her friends, though few, became invaluable. They shared similar interests in music, literature, or art, and they understood the struggles of feeling misunderstood. They would spend hours together, experimenting, giving feedback, and encouraging each other to continue despite setbacks. These friendships became her support system, a reminder that connection and understanding were possible even when the majority of the world did not see her talent. At home, her parents noticed the change in her. She was more focused, more disciplined, and more serious about her dreams. They continued to encourage her, reminding her that talent required patience, persistence, and belief in oneself. They never pressured her for results, knowing that the journey was as important as the outcome. Their quiet support became a foundation that allowed her to take risks in her creativity, knowing she had a safe place to return to. During this period, she faced moments of self-doubt. Some days, she would look at her music, her paintings, and think they were not good enough. The memories of laughter from the competition resurfaced, threatening to shake her confidence. But she developed strategies to cope. She would take breaks, walk outside, listen to inspiring music, or write in her journal about her feelings. This practice strengthened her resilience, teaching her that growth was not linear and that setbacks were part of the process. She began performing in small, private settings like family gatherings or small community events. These performances were not for recognition, but for experience. She learned how to manage stage fright, how to project her voice, and how to connect emotionally with a small audience. Each performance was a step forward, a lesson in courage and technique. Slowly, she realized that performing could be a source of joy, not just fear. Her routine became structured. Mornings were for schoolwork and practice, afternoons for walks or inspiration gathering, and evenings for music and painting. Weekends were reserved for longer practice sessions, experimenting with new ideas, or attending local events to observe and learn from other performers. This disciplined schedule allowed her to grow steadily even if no one else noticed. Her progress was slow but undeniable. It built a foundation for future success. She also studied other musicians and artists, watching performances online and reading about their journeys. She noticed that even the most famous artists had faced setbacks, criticism, and doubt. This realization encouraged her. If they could overcome challenges and persevere, so could she. She began to see setbacks not as failures, but as opportunities to learn and improve. In quiet moments, she reflected on her emotions and experiences. She wrote in her journal about her fears, her hopes, and the small victories she achieved each day. This reflection became a tool for self-awareness, helping her understand her strengths and weaknesses. She learned to celebrate small successes and to view mistakes as lessons. Her mindset shifted from seeking approval to seeking growth. She discovered that creativity was more than talent. it was persistence. Every note she played, every word she wrote, every stroke of the brush added to her skill. The repetition, the effort, and the patience mattered as much as natural ability. She embraced the process, understanding that mastery required dedication over time. It's not just raw talent. Her confidence grew slowly. She started to smile more often during her practice, finding joy in her progress. She shared her music and art with close friends, who responded with genuine admiration. This positive feedback reinforced her belief in herself. She began to feel that she could face larger audiences in the future, that one day, her talent would no longer be hidden. She also developed empathy through her art. She wrote songs about emotions she observed in others, painted scenes that reflected human experiences, and explored themes of hope, struggle, and resilience. This empathy made her creations more relatable and powerful. She realized that talent was not just about skill, but about connecting with people through shared feelings. Her relationship with failure changed. She no longer feared mistakes. Instead, she saw them as essential parts of learning. She experimented with new styles of music, tried painting techniques she had never used, and challenged herself to step outside her comfort zone. Each attempt, whether successful or not, added to her growth and deepened her understanding of her craft. By the end of this period, she had transformed silently. The laughter that once hurt her had become a source of motivation. The setbacks that once discouraged her now taught patience, resilience, and focus. Her talent, nurtured in private, had sharpened. Her music carried emotion. Her art reflected depth, and her confidence had grown steadily. She had become a stronger, wiser, more disciplined version of herself. Though no one outside her circle fully understood the effort she had put in, she knew it mattered. She realized that her growth was not about immediate recognition, but about building a foundation for the future. She felt ready to face challenges, to perform again, and to share her talent more openly when the time was right. In the quiet of her room, she reflected on her journey. She had faced laughter, doubt, and isolation, yet she had not given up. She had learned that true talent required patience, persistence, and courage. She had discovered the power of private growth, the strength in resilience, and the importance of nurturing passion quietly. And with this understanding, she felt prepared for the moment when her talent would finally shine and be impossible to ignore. Months of quiet, practice, and personal growth finally led to an unexpected opportunity. A small local music festival announced that they were looking for performers. It was not a big stage, and the audience would be mostly neighbors and community members. But it was a chance to perform publicly again. At first she hesitated. Memories of the last competition, the laughter, and the embarrassment came flooding back. But something inside her encouraged her to try. This was an opportunity that felt manageable, where she could take her time to prepare and perform in a supportive environment. Her parents were excited when she told them about it. They reminded her that this was not about proving anything to others, but about sharing her passion and enjoying the experience. They offered practical help, helping her arrange transportation, suggesting ways to manage her nerves, and listening to her rehearsals with patient encouragement. Their support gave her confidence that she could take a small risk safely. She began preparing for the festival with more energy and focus than ever before. The music she composed during her private practice became the foundation of her performance. She carefully selected songs that reflected her emotions, her journey, and her growth. She practiced each note until her fingers could move across the keys almost automatically. She practiced singing while moving her hands, her body, and her expressions, learning how to communicate more fully through performance. As the day of the festival approached, her nerves grew. She walked through scenarios in her mind. What if people laughed? What if she made a mistake? But she reminded herself of the months of preparation, the discipline she had developed, and the passion that had never wavered. She focused on the music, on expressing herself, and not on the judgment of the audience. The festival was held in a community hall. There were chairs arranged for the audience, a small stage with basic lighting, and a microphone for performers. She watched other participants perform before her. Some were confident, others nervous, some funny, others serious. The audience reacted differently to each act, clapping politely or laughing. She felt the familiar pang of anxiety, but pushed it aside. She reminded herself that this was her moment to share her art, not to compete or be compared. When her turn came, she walked onto the stage with a quiet determination. Her hands trembled slightly, but her mind was focused. She took a deep breath, looked at the piano, and began to play. The music flowed naturally, filled with the emotion she had poured into it over months of private practice. Her voice, clear and strong, carried through the hall, expressing feelings that words alone could not capture. At first, the audience was quiet, watching curiously. But as she continued, something remarkable happened. People stopped talking, leaning forward in their seats, captivated by the music and emotion in her performance. There were no loud reactions, no laughter, just a growing silence that was filled with attention and focus. Her fingers moved gracefully over the keys, her voice rose and fell with emotion, and her body expressed the story behind the song. For the first time, she felt a sense of connection with the audience. She could see people reacting, eyes glistening, heads nodding, and some even mouthing the words along with her song. It was a quiet, subtle recognition, but it was undeniable. She was no longer performing for herself alone. The music reached others, touching them in ways that words could not. The laughter and ridicule that had haunted her from the past seemed distant, replaced by this genuine, quiet appreciation. When the last note faded, there was a moment of silence. Then the audience began clapping, softly at first, then with growing enthusiasm. Some people stood up, showing their admiration. She felt a wave of relief, pride, and joy washing over her. She had faced her fear, performed despite doubt, and for the first time. Her talent had been recognized without sarcasm or mockery. She walked off the stage with a smile, feeling lighter than she had in months. After the performance, people came up to her, praising her music, asking questions, and expressing how much her performance had moved them. She listened, nodding, smiling, and thanking them. For the first time, she realized that her talent could inspire, touch hearts, and create a genuine connection. It was a feeling she had dreamed of, but never experienced so fully. The festival became a turning point in her journey. She realized that talent alone was not enough. Courage, persistence, and preparation were equally important. She had transformed from a quiet, hesitant performer into someone who could share her art with confidence. The experience showed her that the world could respond positively, that people could be moved by sincerity, and that laughter from the past did not define her future. In the days following the festival, she received messages of encouragement from neighbors, friends, and even strangers who had attended. Some shared how her music had reminded them of their own struggles, while others praised her dedication and skill. These responses were not the main goal, but they reinforced the importance of sharing her gift. She began to feel a sense of purpose, realizing that her talent was not just a personal escape, but a means to connect, inspire, and touch the lives of others. This opportunity also changed the way she viewed setbacks. She understood that challenges and ridicule were part of the path to growth. The laughter that once seemed devastating was now a distant memory, placed by the knowledge that persistence and self-belief could lead to meaningful recognition. She learned to embrace opportunities, even small ones. Understanding that each step forward built confidence and skill, she continued practicing, composing, and refining her music. The festival experience gave her new motivation, and she started exploring more ambitious pieces, experimenting with arrangements, harmonies, and emotional depth. Her art and music became richer, more nuanced, and more expressive. She began to envision larger stages, bigger audiences, and the possibility of sharing her talent beyond her community. Her relationships also deepened. Friends who had supported her quietly now shared in her success, celebrating her growth and encouraging her further. She learned the value of surrounding herself with people who understood her journey, who supported her dreams, and who helped her navigate the challenges of pursuing a passion in a world that could be. Judgmental and critical, the festival marked a shift in her mindset. She no longer viewed public performances as terrifying obstacles, but as opportunities to express herself and connect with others. Each performance became a chance to learn, to grow, and to refine her craft. She embraced the challenges, understanding that fear was a natural part of stepping forward. But it did not have to control her. Over time, her confidence grew. She sought out more opportunities to perform, each one building on the lessons of the previous experience. She approached every stage with a mix of preparation, passion, and authenticity. The audience, too, responded positively, drawn to the sincerity and emotion she conveyed through her music. Slowly, she realized that her talent was being recognized not because she had changed herself, but because she had stayed true to her passion and persevered despite doubt. This period of her life showed her the power of perseverance, patience, and courage. It taught her that setbacks, ridicule, and fear were part of the journey, but they could be overcome with dedication and belief in oneself. The experience reinforced her understanding that talent is not just about skill, but about sharing it with honesty and heart. By the end of this chapter, she had taken a significant step toward realizing her dreams. She had faced fear, performed under pressure, and experienced genuine recognition. Her talent, once hidden and underestimated, had begun to shine in the eyes of others. She felt empowered, motivated, and ready for the next stage of her journey. She knew challenges would continue, but she also knew that she had the inner strength, discipline, and passion to face them and to continue growing, preparing for the moment when her talent would silence every doubt and laughter from the past. After her first festival performance, she felt a new sense of purpose. The experience had shown her that her talent could be seen and appreciated when shared with courage and authenticity. The applause, the smiles, and the genuine recognition gave her confidence. But it also reminded her that growth was continuous. She knew that to reach her potential, she would have to keep working, keep performing, and keep pushing beyond comfort and fear. She began seeking more opportunities to perform. Local events, school gatherings, community centers, and even small online platforms became stages for her. Each performance taught her something new. She learned how to read the audience, how to manage nerves, how to communicate emotions through music, and how to handle mistakes gracefully. Every performance was practice. Every audience was a teacher. And every note was a step toward mastery. Her confidence grew steadily, and people began to notice. Teachers, neighbors, and friends who had once underestimated her now showed respect. Some were surprised, others inspired, and a few expressed admiration for her perseverance. She welcomed their recognition, but remained focused on her own growth. She had learned that validation from others was rewarding, but not necessary. The true reward was the fulfillment she felt when sharing her art, the joy of creating. In the sense of accomplishment from overcoming challenges, her family continued to support her, proud of both her progress and the person she had become. They celebrated her achievements quietly, understanding that success was not always about fame or prizes, but about consistency, effort, and the courage to keep going. They encouraged her to remain humble and patient, reminding her that every step forward was valuable, no matter how small. She also became an inspiration to those around her. Younger students, classmates, and friends began seeking her advice, curious about her journey and dedication. She shared her experiences openly, explaining how practice, perseverance, and self-belief had helped her overcome setbacks and criticism. Her story encouraged others to pursue their passions even when facing challenges or doubt. In this way, her talent became more than personal achievement. It became a source of motivation for others. Despite growing recognition, she remained grounded. She practiced daily, refined her music, and explored new creative avenues. She experimented with styles she had never tried, composed more complex pieces, and performed in a variety of settings. Her art matured, reflecting not just skill, but depth, emotion, and personal experience. She discovered that true talent is nurtured over time, shaped by persistence, discipline, and courage. Her past experiences with ridicule now seemed distant. Though they had played a crucial role in shaping her resilience, The laughter that had once hurt her had become a catalyst for growth. She had learned to face fear, to channel emotion into art, and to value her own judgment over the opinions of others. The setbacks had taught her patience, humility, and the importance of inner strength. They had also taught her empathy, enabling her to understand and connect with the emotions of her audience as she performed at increasingly larger events. She noticed the change in how people responded. Where there had once been doubt or indifference, there was now genuine attention, appreciation, and respect. People listened, absorbed her music, and reacted with emotion. Some were moved to tears, others to smiles, and some simply nodded in silent admiration. Her talent had become undeniable, and her growth, perseverance, and authenticity had created an impact far greater than she had ever imagined. She also began to collaborate with other artists. Working with peers and mentors introduced her to new perspectives, techniques, and ideas. These collaborations enhanced her creativity, expanded her skill set, and helped her see the possibilities within her talent. She discovered that growth is not solitary, but enriched by interaction, feedback, and shared experiences. These partnerships strengthened her artistry and deepened her appreciation for collaboration and learning. Over time, she performed on bigger stages, facing larger audiences and greater expectations. Each performance required courage, preparation, and focus. But she approached every challenge with the mindset she had developed over years, practiced diligently, performed sincerely, and embraced the experience fully. Her ability to connect with audiences grew, and her performances became more expressive, moving, and memorable. The talent that had once been hidden in private practice now shone brightly in public. Touching hearts and inspiring others, her personal growth paralleled her artistic growth. She became more confident in everyday life, expressing her thoughts and feelings with clarity and authenticity. The resilience she had developed allowed her to navigate challenges with patience and composure. She learned to balance ambition with humility, perseverance with self-care, and growth with gratitude. Her journey had shaped not only